Hey guys, Tarky and a cat. Now, as the title suggests, bye bye cat, we're going to be looking at the pros and cons of legendary items in Legion. Now, before I go into that, I'm going to very quickly address my absence on YouTube the last 2 weeks. Where have I been? What's going on? Basically, I'm just really ill at the moment. I've got Crohn's disease and I've got loads of really boring health stuff, so just sort of bear with me. I'm working on it. Sorry you've had to wait so long. So, what this video is going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the pros, the good things of the legendary system, and then the bad things. Because at the moment there's a big sort of debate going on in the community. Half the people are saying, oh, you know, these guys who are against it are elitists. You know, other people saying, oh, this is just really fun, this is too much Diablo. So whatever. Now, where are these viewpoints coming from? So I'm a tank, so bear with me when I, talk about DPS and healing stuff. And I'm the raid leader of a guild who's got heroic cooldown, and we're trying to get Ross drop for mythic. So, heroic raiding guild. We're not top end, but we're sort of intermediate level. And I had many expansions just as a PvPer. I didn't care about rating too much. I just sort of did it for the fun. So, sort of intimate level of knowledge for both PvE and PvP respectively. Let's get into it. Now, the first big thing, right, is that this is definitely a more interesting way of doing legendaries than the standard model of you get a quest, you grind 100 stones, you get a new quest, you grind 1,000 stones, you get a boring ring, right? So if you look at some of the ones we've got in front of us, Marrowend is a new tanking ability, I believe. It grants you 20% leech for 6 seconds. That's just like a powerful ability. Some of them are a bit more interesting than others. So if we look at sort of this one here, this is just a standard. You deal 35% increased damage if you have both of your dots up, and you should always have both of your dots up. So if you look at just those two to begin with, and we'll go into the others later, you kind of go, okay, well, they're not that interesting. They're just sort of powerful buffs. And from this point of view, the raider in me is kind of going, okay, so these are just mandatory items I need. Now, this, I think, is one of the core issues or downsides of the legendary system, is you have some legendaries like this which are quite boring, they don't impact your gameplay that much, and they're just performance enhancers, yeah? They don't change the way you play. If you look at this one, for example, the cost of Thrash is reduced by 20%. It's something, it at least changes your rotation. If you kind of look at this one, spawn seeds at nearby location every 12 seconds. Seeds grow for 6 seconds before blooming, healing all allies. So you kind of go, okay, so you need to start thinking. It starts changing your gameplay. So from the very beginning, even just looking at the druid, you kind of notice there's this issue of some of these are quite well designed and some of them are just quite boring. Now, why does that matter? So at the moment, for example, even though I'm trying to get my guild into mythic raiding, as a tank, I still do not have the legendary ring, which my healing officers always rage at me at. Why don't I have the legendary ring? As a tank, a blood DK, it doesn't affect me that much. It's basically a 2-minute activate DPS cooldown. In all of Mythic, there are only about 1, maybe 2 bosses at most where you could legitimately use it as a defensive option. And so I've been slacking because it's not interesting. It's something which is like, yeah, that'll make my character a little bit better, but, I'm not compelled to go out and get it, and I will have to get it at some point, right? So why am I mentioning that? Well, if you look at something like, Thrash, it reduces the cost by 20%. That's not that huge. It might lead into some things where it fixes your rotation enough that you might be able to fit in a little bit extra bursts over like a long period of sustained DPS, and it's actually rather impactful, but it's not exciting, right? It's not juicy. Even this quite boring 35% increased damage, that's quite a juicy thing. If I'm playing a Boomkin and I know there's an item I can get which gives me 35% more damage on my main nuke, I'm compelled to go and get that, right? Compare it to this spawn seeds, that is just interesting. That just sounds fun. That's something I want to go out and get. So from the very beginning, depending on what class you play, what role you play, you are going to have an issue where you are just not compelled to get your legendary, either because it's not a very interesting effect or it's not that impactful. Whereas for other classes, they have to go out and get it, or they really want to go out and get it, and it's a more exciting process. Now, why is that important? It's kind of important twofold. Now, adding legendaries into the game doesn't necessarily add new content. We do not know exactly how they're going to be implemented. Most people are assuming that these will be very rare drop chance from mobs and from bounties. If you don't know what bounties are, basically it's a new system they're adding in Legion. It's exactly the same as the bounty system from Diablo 3. You get little, basically, quests. Think of like the bonus objectives we had while leveling in Warlords of Draenor out in the zones, and it's like, go kill 10 of these, go kill that guy, collect 10 of these, and you complete all of the bounties in a quest, in a questing hub, and then you get a cache, like a box. You open the box, there's random goodies inside, then all the bounties reset, and it's just like a spamming mode, right? Now, that is a new system. That is new content. Adding these items doesn't necessarily add new content to the game, it adds busy work to the game. If the only way we can obtain these items are either grinding out mobs, or spamming bounties all day until you eventually get the item you need, that isn't exciting. Now, I'm going to make a quick comparison to Diablo 3 because this is a system directly taken from Diablo 3. In Diablo 3, there is a legendary ring called the Ring of Royal Grandeur. Basically, what that ring did is it meant that you could equip your set and get your set bonuses with one less, right? So, for example, think about it, WoW right now, you want your 4 set bonus. If you had that ring equipped, you could get your 4 set bonus with only 3 items equipped. Obviously, this is a very powerful ring, especially in a game like Diablo where you have multiple sets on at once. So what you could do is you could wear this ring and you could mix and match, and you could have 2 like full set bonuses. Now, this was obviously a very powerful ring. The way you got this ring was farming bounties in a specific area. What this meant is that whenever you made a fresh character, the first thing you had to do when you got to max level was get your ring. So what did you do? You farmed Act 1 bounties over and over and over and over again, and it was completely RNG on when you got it. It was really, really boring. It was kind of interesting the first character you made for like an hour, and then it got dull. When you're on your like 5th, 6th, 7th character, and it's just, oof. This is gameplay which is still in the game now, and the expansion's been out for a year. What they've done since they first introduced that system is made it easier and easier to get it. They've basically tweaked the numbers where you'll get it faster. But still, it is a chore that no one enjoys doing, right? And that is one thing which immediately shouted out to me when they announced this new legendary system. This is something they've copied directly from D3, and the D3 community doesn't like this system. They complain about it. Now, at least with this system proposed, you can get these legendary items from mobs, right? So what will most likely happen is a system will form where you either, depending on what character and build you play, you either power farm mobs, kind of like Chinese bot style, and there will be an issue with botting and this system, which we'll get into a new point. But you either power farm mobs, or you specifically target certain bounties which lead you into killing lots of monsters. So you sort of double dip your chances of getting the items, right? So the core implementation doesn't actually add new content. It's stuff you have to do, right? Now, that doesn't mean that legendaries are bad. Again, if we sort of look down and look at a few other ones, you've got something else to look at now. So some of these, big, important, quite fun. Other ones kind of like just, again, that mandatory thing. So if we look here, the duration of stagger is increased by 40%. And another thing that I'll point out quickly, all of these legendary items, as of now, do not have secondary stats. It's just they have a whole load of main stat, a whole load of stamina, and they've got this legendary affix. If you don't know what an affix is, it's like an ARPG term, basically the special text, right? So you have your main stat, your secondary, the special text. So why is that important? Well, I'm assuming that these legendaries are going to be disabled in all rated PvP. The reason why I assume that is that, one, I don't think the PvP crowd will really like it, and also there's a lot of stuff which gives, like, combat reses. Let me just see if I can quickly find one. There'll be one in here. So yeah, your heals apply Eternal Warrior for 8 seconds. If a player dies while Eternal Warrior is active, 20% of your remaining mana is consumed, but they return to full health. Obviously, in 3v3 Arena, this item cannot exist because you might even run double healer metas, and again, it doesn't necessarily say that you have to be a pure healing class to wear this. You could just be like a hybrid, like a Shadow Priest, wear this cape. Oh, your friend is dropping, just throw a little heal on him. He gets rezzed. Again, DPS don't really care about mana. So it's all sort of sketchy ground, right? Now, again, so assuming this is going to be disabled in RBGs, rated arena, all of that good stuff. Obviously, they aren't going to be disabled in raiding because what would the point be? So what that leaves you with is these items will be in raiding. They will be in unranked, so just random BGs. Sorry, my cat is jumping around like a lunatic at the moment. And they will be in, obviously, solo content, world content, and the new 5-man challenge mode system. If you don't know what the new 5-man challenge mode system, again, this is a mechanic they've taken over from D3. Basically, the way this will work is that while you're out doing your adventures, there is a chance you'll get a key. The key opens like a special 5-man with crazy mods on it. Again, we're talking mods, affixes, ARPG terms. Like, you enter this area and there are triple monsters. They attack 100% faster. They drop double loot. When you kill a monster, they explode in fire, and the fire goes all over the floor. These are like actual terms. You complete it within a certain time limit. You're then key upgrades, so then you get like level 2 key. It becomes slightly harder, but you get slightly better loot at the end of it, and there'll be like leaderboards who can get to the highest, right? Why is that important? For that kind of a system, I think legendaries are amazing. I think that for raiding, legendaries are poor. I think for the new 5-man challenge system, legendaries are absolutely amazing. The reason why I think that is you're going to have some really wacky combos coming up where you might get stuff like double tank, triple DPS, and the way you do it is you have one of those DPS be a hybrid, like a Elisham. They use this Eternal Warrior thing, and basically what they do is you have the 2 tanks which take threat off each other, so they give each other mini buffers. The DPS are just going crazy on the DPS, and then if anyone's dropping, you just throw a little like healing rain. Like literally, you could just drop a healing rain, that would count, and you would constantly re-res, and you don't really care about mana. Again, we don't really know how it will work with hybrids and stuff, but you can already sort of see where these crazy combinations might come from. So, you know, what you could do is you could go into, because again, it's random, so you put your key in, you get these random mods on it, you go, oh god, you know, it's got that really difficult healing thing. So one of the affixes they showed at BlizzCon was when you enter this 5-man, every player in your group takes persistent damage over time, which would ramp up as you got closer to the end. Now, in a case like that, then if you've got the perfect healer counter, then boom, you know, problem solved. And it would be quite interesting gameplay where you're swapping up your group composition and your legendary composition to better target the 5-man mechanics. And this is a very good system because they can constantly add new mechanics to the 5-mans as they add in new legendaries, and there's very good synergy where you can have quite targeted counters. So if one legendary became too powerful, rather than nerfing that legendary, you could counter it by adding in mechanics which purposely go against it in the 5-man. So for example, a lot of the things, here's an example of it, a lot of these legendary DPS wise have like very good AoE effects, and if for example AoE just became too powerful, you could have a legendary affix which was, sorry, a 5-man affix, which when you enter this dungeon, you know, all mobs take 90% less AoE damage, or AoE damage is redirected to your tanks or reflected, and there's weird things you could do which promote single target, which would then introduce a new meta. New legendaries would come into play, new class stacking would come into play, and this, that, and the other, which is very interesting. Now, that's all great. From a raiding point of view, though, and this is what I'm going to touch into now, and again, heroic, not mythic, so I'm not, you know, a top end, I'm a intermediate player. Some of these are just completely and utterly ridiculous and mandatory. Again, I haven't bothered to get my legendary ring yet because I go, yeah. Some of these I would have to get because they are just so powerful that it's like, whoosh. So, if we look at something like this one, when you dodge, parry, or block an incoming attack, your next auto attack deals 150% increased damage. That's just powerful. That's just a cool thing. Now, I play my Death Knight as kind of like a hybrid tank DPS. That's something which is interesting to me, right? That's something I'd be compelled to farm rather than here's a ring with a load of versatility on it, you press it and your character gets a bit bigger. That's pretty boring. 50, we're assuming this is 50%. A lot of these, you know, have flat numbers, which obviously we're not going to reflect 50 damage, but 50% of damage you take for the next 6 seconds is instead split amongst enemies within 10 yards of you. Again, I'm the raid leader, so I get to dictate where people stand, but that's a really interesting item. on certain ad-heavy bosses, and I'm a Death Knight, so I already want to stand in mechanics with anti-magic shell to gain runic power. If you're a Death Knight and you have this, then there's going to be some crazy mechanics where you're purposely not having your active mitigation up. You're tanking like a one-shot mechanic. You have an ability called Purgatory, which is basically a 3-minute cheat death. So you would purposely get one shot with this item equipped, and then you would just completely decimate all of the ads instantly. And there could be some very... Because again, because you have your cheat death, you don't need to mitigate the damage at all. You don't need to put any up any defensives. There'll be some really interesting / borderline broken things going on, and that's another system which worries me about this. So what tends to happen, is you all know this, we've all played the game for long enough, is there will be crazy little mechanics, right? So you get crazy little mechanics which are a little bit sort of powerful but not that bad. But then you get, a top raiding guild like Method or something, and they stack 40 feral druids, and then they one-shot Nefarian, Or they do these weird little things, or, you get that one PvP comp, which is absolutely unkillable. So at the start of Warlords of Draenor, for example, in 2s, you had Boomkin Brewmaster monks, because the way that Guard worked in PvP was broken, so you could never kill the Boomkin, and you couldn't hit the Boomkin, because if you hit the Boomkin, he would one-shot you with Star Surge. Right, so you get these crazy little things which then become meta, then they get nerfed into the ground. Now, the issue with this is the legendary items are a core grind, yeah? So for someone who's really into theory crafting and number crunching, this is very exciting, as I just said with the example of that Collar of the Lifebinder. Now, I'll come up with some crazy little meta thing, like, oh, this is great, yeah? And I make my entire raid comp around it. And I force all of my raiders to get very specific legendary items. I spend hours upon days upon weeks. I finally get my item, right? And I've got it. And then we do this thing. And then Blizzard comes in, they nerf that item to the ground. And they, no, it was too powerful, we had to nerf it. Now, it's frustrating when a class gets nerfed. So, for example, if you play a Fire Mage and then they nerf your Fire Mage into the ground and you have to go play Frost, that's already a bad feeling. But at least you can go play Frost, right? Imagine you spend, days upon weeks getting screwed over by RNG. You finally get your Collar of the Lifebinder. You're really hyped. And then they nerf it into the ground and it's useless. And it's just sort of sat in your inventory. And you've now got to go out and farm a new legendary. That is something we are going to fall into. Because the problem is some of these effects are just so ridiculously powerful. This will happen. I'll show you a few new ones. So, Warlock. The cast time of all demon summoning spells is removed. That's already pretty powerful. And your demons deal 20% additional damage. Now, let's think about that. Demonology Warlocks in the new expansion are all about demon pets. That may as well read as you just deal, let's say, 15% additional damage, because obviously some of your moves you cast yourself, but, nearly all of your damage comes from your demons. This is a helm which says you deal, let's say, 15% more damage. Does that sound powerful to you? Yes. If you are a raider, do you have to have this? Yes. That isn't interesting. That is just something required. Now, you go out, you farm it, and then they go, okay, Demonology is now the new best spec, as what happened in Warlords of Draenor. Blizzard is in a case now where they either nerf the class, right? And you either nerf the class so people don't feel bad about this legendary they farmed for ages, to bring them into line, or they nerf the legendary into the ground. And you're going to end up in this really weird system where Blizzard are going to be doing targeted nerfs and buffs. And you could say that it's good that they can now nerf / buff an item rather than destroying a class, but it's not going to feel fun. And this is another layer. And you could say, but Tarky, they've got a long time to work on this system. They do. The issue with this system is you need to spend so much time balancing these items around their current set state and then any other crazy things you add into the game later. What I mean by that is this limits their set design. So you make a new set, you want it to be fun, you want it to be crazy, you want it to be kind of borderline OP. You need to think really hard about every single set you design because you've added these items into the game. Going back to ARPGs, because this is a system directly taken from ARPGs, most ARPG developers, they talk about limited design space and how They introduced this item, and because they introduced this item, it limited all future design because the combination of the two would be so ridiculously powerful. Jumping off into a different game, sorry, but Path of Exile, they had a mechanic called shotgunning. Basically, the way that shotgunning worked is that you could take a spell, you could add multiple projectiles to it. So instead of it was fireball, you shot like 3 fireballs. You stand in front of a mob, all 3 hits them at the same time, they shotgun, and they do crazy damage. Sounds like a kind of cool, interesting, fun mechanic. It was. People made really interesting characters around this mechanic. They did. It was really powerful. Yep. What happened was, every time the guys who made Path of Exile wanted to make a new skill, they couldn't because it'd be too powerful with shotgunning, right? And they kept running into this issue. They go, oh, we've got this really cool new idea. They couldn't add it into the game because shotgunning existed. So what happened is, over the space of a few years, they introduced new, overly nerfed skills, or they would spend weeks upon months tweaking a skill idea to make it not work with shotgunning, and in the end they just deleted shotgunning from the game, and now they can go back to making interesting skills. What worries me about this system, and again, these items will scale from the start to the end of the expansion. Once you've gotten your Wilfred's Hood of Superior Summoning, you're basically never going to unequip that item unless they make a new crazy overpowered helm. That's kind of frustrating, right? So this will seriously limit potential design space. Maybe in that case not so much, because that's just a flat buff. But if you look at something like this, the Arkanstar. Chain Lightning deals 50% increased damage each time it jumps to a new enemy. This is quite interesting. This is, you know, you start thinking about in what fights is it worth picking up, but you now need to worry about anything you design for Chamois that might buff Chain Lightning. So that's talents, just actual number tweak sets, you know. It's all a bit of a design space headache. And I think, personally, that's the biggest issue with this system, because when it comes to 5-mans, this is an amazing system, this is a fun system, I would be compelled to go out and grind it. Coming from a random BG thing, this is really fun, right? Random BGs, I'm assuming these will be enabled just because who cares, right? But at the same time, let's not give adverts for them. At the same time, you have issues where in Mists of Pandaria there were world bosses that you could kill. And if you killed the world boss, they had a chance to drop a funnel item. There were a series of giant animals in Mists, which if you killed them, they dropped like a tuft of fur, was the name of the item. And you basically use it and you moved at like 500% move speed from one side of the map to the other. Now, this was in the game for a very long time. What started to happen though is people realized they could use these in BGs. So what they would do is the people who just spam random BGs all day, every day, which is actually quite a large portion of the PvP community, by far the majority of the PvP community, is they would just stand at the rare spawn locations on the map, and they would get a group of friends, because I did this. I had a group of 5 people, and I think there were 3 or 4 different rares in Mists which could drop these items. We'd all stand at one spawn point, and in between queues, we would just naturally get the spawn kills. So we never ran out of these items. Now, what this meant is if we were in Arithi Basin, for example, at the start of every single Arithi Basin, we could cap, you know, the whole map. Because we would just get there before anyone else. Now, in the end, they had to disable that item in random BGs. Why am I talking about that? You run that risk. You will have players who go out of their way to acquire these items for a particular form of content, and then further down the line you either need to disable them in that content, which feels bad, man, or you need to nerf them into oblivion. And that's one thing which really worries me. Now, one of the DPS boots, if I can find it to show you, was for as much haste as you had, you gained movement speed. Let me see if they're listed. I tried looking at them earlier, I couldn't find them. Now, that's obviously an issue when it comes to stuff like Warsong Gulch. Anything, well, basically every single BG requires some form of speed mobility. Even this monk one right here, if Touch of Death does not kill your target, they will suffer its effect every 30 seconds until they die. Like, basically what will happen is you get low, a monk touch of death to you, usually that's a one shot, but sometimes you can survive it, right? So let's say you're a death knight, you've got purgatory, or a rogue, you've got cheat death, or you somehow get like a crazy disc absorb shield and you somehow survive this execute. Yeah, you're then just screwed, because every 30 seconds you're like taking your whole health bar in one hit. That's not that fun to play around, right? So you then say, okay, well, that's simple, right? We just disable this in random battleground, so it's not usable in any form of player versus player. Okay. What does this kind of system appeal to? Because that's another thing you need to think about. What does this system appeal to? The way you acquire these items is by doing bounties, doing world content, and farming mobs. Now, what is a really good way of introducing world PvP back into the game? Localized mob farming, world bounties, and this, right? So basically this entire system promotes gameplay PvPers have been asking for ages. This is the perfect kind of system. Most PvPers, speaking of someone who did this for about 3 or 4 expansions, who aren't into like crazy rated PvP, they log in. If their mates are online, they do RBG farm. If their mates aren't online, they sort of just meander about doing the silly little world stuff they have to do. Why did most PvPers leave during WoD? Is outside of their random BGs, they didn't have anything to do because no one liked Ashran. This is the perfect system. Are your mates online to RBG farm? No. Let's go do a bunch of bounties. I might get that one really powerful item. Right? So it's a very good system for that, but it's inherently flawed for that player. So let's go into the 5-man thing, right? With 5-mans, the way that 5-mans work is the level of gear you acquire from them is meant to be competitive with top-end raiding gear, apparently. Again, they won't have stuff like set bonuses, so raiding gear hopefully will be better, because otherwise you'll have this issue where people who care about the top-end raiding have to do endless 5-man spam, kind of like what they have to do now, but anyway. Endless 5-man spam, raiding multiple difficulties every week, and then doing their bounties for a chance of getting a thing, right? So this whole system kind of screws over the top elite of raiders, because there's oh so much time in the day. So it kind of screws over the PvP crowd, kind of. It kind of screws over the top raiding crowd. It's very good for the all I do is 5-man content, and this was something which existed. Like, this used to be a playstyle. If you look back at Wrath of the Lich King, there was a very viable playstyle of I maybe pug like Nax or something, and then I just spam my heroic 5-mans, I get my badges, I get my gear, it's fun. If a friend invites me into a raid group, I can sort of, join the raid and do okay. Like, that was a very popular playstyle, and the numbers, like the subscriber numbers, supported that aspect. As the game has lost that aspect of the game, the numbers have gone down. Is that a direct link? No, but I think it's kind of related. So for that sort of demographic, this is a very good system. But that isolates a much larger section of the game. Pardon me. So what you need to do as Blizzard, and this is why it's both a pros and a cons list, because that's clearly a very good system, is that they need to decide who they're catering the game for. Because you can't just cater the game for one demographic. Now, again, this is one thing I really want to stress, and I think this is kind of what happens when people start saying, oh, elitists, they don't want casuals to have good items and stuff. Preach made a very similar video a few days back, and he got a lot of hate on it because of some of the stuff he was saying. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all of his sentiments, but there is a quite legitimate response to, just because you choose to raid, and raiding is what's fun about you, does that mean that you need to grind? Let that kind of sink in. If these items, as many of them are, look at fire mages, like both of these look pretty kind of important, are required to raid at a top level, you will not get into the top guilds without these items. Again, take into account that most top raiding guilds require players to have multiple ults. So what that will mean is that if you are a top player, you'll have to have 2 to 3 characters, fully geared. Doesn't sound that big of a deal. The way you get gear now is the artifact system. How do you get artifact system? You grind out world objectives to upgrade your artifacts. Most people are forced into playing multiple specs. Again, in Legion, we're getting tri-spec. There's no dual spec. You can swap any spec at any point, further encouraging players to play every single spec. So they will have to have every single spec on their character fully pimped out artifact-wise, which will take a substantial period of time. They will have to spam these challenge modes to get very good gear outside of set pieces, so like to get the best trinkets or the best rings and whatever, on multiple characters. They will have to get 2 to 3 legendaries. Nowhere does it say they are limited to 1. Most of these have very good synergy, cross synergy between each other. These 2, for example. So I assume you'll be able to equip as many as you want, and the limiting factor will be making sure you get your 4 set, making sure you get your good trinket, and then, you know, there will be limiting factors. If you need 50% crit, and again, these items don't give you secondary stats, that's where the math comes in of, is it worth me having this crazy legendary, or do I need a ring with stats on it? But anyway, you'll need 2 to 3 legendary items per character, and then raid heroic and mythic, or normal and heroic and mythic on each character. Now, that's a lot, right? Again, I'm just a heroic guy, and I'm not very happy with the fact that I need to do mythic 5-mans every week, a daily heroic 3 levels of LFR, right? Because that isn't new content. That is busy work which has been added to the game so I can get Val upgrades. That's my kind of big thing with this system. It's a very fun system. They're very interesting. Design space-wise is amazing. But it adds a lot of busy work. And I think that's the one big downfall of this entire system, is it is a busy work system. And part of me wonders, how can you better implement it? Because we don't want to just, you know, say, oh, this is bad, scrap it, right? So you're left with a few, you know, potentials. Assuming they can be used in random BGs. If you do a random BG, at the end of it you get a lockbox. Maybe have a chance that you can get these items in your lockbox. Because then if you're a player who only does random battlegrounds all day, every day, you can just do the content you want to do to try and get this item. It may not be as efficient as going out and farming bounties all day, but if you don't want to farm bounties, you shouldn't have to farm bounties to be efficient, right? Have it that they could come from lockboxes. Again, you could have a system with raiders that there is a very low chance that you could get a token drop, which you could trade in. I think having these items being like a 0.5% boss drop is bad, because you would run into that really horrible issue of, let's say you're a mage and Fate Binder keeps dropping, which is you can just cast Ice Barrier while casting other spells. That's not very interesting, right? If you're Arcane, you want this one, like Arcane Barrage affects an additional enemy per charge. That's amazing. If you're Fire, you want one of these 3, right? Like, those are, wow, I want those. Again, there's no Frost spec one, except for, like, this pathetic thing. So I'm assuming there's either more to come, or that's it. And again, that's an issue, right? If you play a Frost Mage, and you've got a Fire Mage and Arcane Mage next to you, and they're like, oh, dude, look at my crazy new Legendary. And you're like, yeah, I can cast Ice Barrier. It feels bad, right? So anyway, you maybe have a chance of it being dropped on bosses. Or, and this is probably the system that I would personally prefer the most, you make these items incredibly easy to obtain. And you basically treat them like mini attunements. If you make these items incredibly easy to obtain, so it's like you do X amount of bounties and then you get it. If you have an RNG system where you make a new character, the first like 2 to 3 weeks of that character is you go do all this busy work and you get all these really cool, fun, interesting items, that I don't mind so much, because then you just treat it like an attunement system. The top raiders can't really complain about that, because a lot of the top raiders miss BC style attunements, or some do, right? But they miss that hardcore aspect of the game. If you have a fixed attunement, which again isn't a expansion long boring quest chain of, you know, collect 1,000 stones, but of kind of like, yeah, you do your bounties and there's an RNG mechanic that increases your chance every failed one post 100 or whatever, right? the PvP crowd who just do the rated PvP guys, they don't care because these don't work for them, right? So it's just like, nah, if they have them, whatever, right? But the people who just spam randoms when their friends aren't online, they go, oh, well, I can work on that for a bit and I might be lucky and I might get it straight up, or I might get a fixed one in 100 tries. So that gives them something to keep them busy when they're not PvPing. The 5-man crowd, it doesn't really affect them at all. It being fixed just means they get it a bit quicker. And for the LFR casual whatever, the sort of scapegoat people like to rage on, I think it's kind of a myth that these players okay, I'm gonna get rage. There is a demonized subset of the community. You're not bad is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, you guys can still get it because it's easier for you to get now, so you're still getting your really fun, interesting item. No one needs to feel bad, right? Everyone gets the item. But you then still have the issue that these items exist in the game. So, Blizzard, please take into account the fact that acquiring these items isn't going to be very fun, and that some of these items are just completely and utterly ridiculous. Even if you give all of these items to a fresh player the second they hit level 110, if you're the Frost Mage, you're gonna feel bad if that's all you get, right? And as Blizzard, you need to design new legendaries, you need to design new artifacts, you need to design new sets. This limits your design space. As you can hear, my voice is going. I'm Tarky, the cat is AFK. Apologies, you've had to wait 2 weeks to get a very long video in which my voice disappears. These are the pros and cons of the legendary item system. See you again soon with more Legion updates. I need a drink. Bye-bye.